The tiny Bosnian town of Srebrenica and the Palestinian territory of Gaza are nearly 2,000 kilometers apart, but they are united in one aspect: as victims of UN failure. How? Let's start with the Srebrenica genocide. In July 1995, around 8,000 Muslim men and boys were killed by Bosnian Serb troops. Many Muslim victims had fled to a UN-declared safe zone in Srebrenica, but the outnumbered and lightly armed Dutch peacekeeper forces there were unable to defend them in Srebrenica, where UN peacekeeping forces were reluctant to heed requests for support from their own forces. The Dutch forces surrendered Srebrenica to Bosnian Serb forces without putting up a fight. They also handed the 300 Bosnian men and boys who had sought refuge in the Dutch base over to the Bosnian Serbs, who subsequently killed them. That ultimately made it easier for Bosnian Serb forces to overrun defenses and have free rein to assault, rape, and execute civilians. Among the UN's failures was its leadership's opposition to deploying air power against the armed ethnic Serbs, but also its extremely flawed intelligence in the days preceding the genocide. As former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan said,
"We gave the Security Council the impression that the situation was under control, and many of us believed that to be the case. The day before Srebrenica fell, we reported that the Serbs were not attacking when they were. We reported that the Bosnians had fired on UNPRO for blocking position when it was the Serbs. We failed to mention urgent requests for air power."
What about the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories? How does UN failure manifest there? Ever since the Israeli state was created in 1948, Palestinians have been experiencing what the UN call ethnic cleansing. At least 15,000 Palestinians were killed, and some 750,000 out of a total population of 1.9 million were forced to flee in 1948. Israel today controls 85% of historical Palestine, and despite various UN resolutions calling for an end to Israel's settler activities, there is no way to enforce such aims. Let's fast forward to Israel's onslaught on Palestine's Gaza. Remember, in Gaza, there aren't even any UN-designated safe zones, only Israeli ones. According to the UN, such safe zones are not rational and not possible in Gaza. The UN has failed to implement a permanent ceasefire, adequately distribute humanitarian aid, deploy UN forces to protect civilians, or even provide accountability. That last one would be up to UN member states or ICJ signatories to make their priority. The veto powers that are intrinsic to UN Security Council prevent resolutions from moving forward. Any one of the 5 permanent members can veto any resolution, while the 10 remaining members can only vote but not veto. The US has wielded its veto power several times to counter UNSC resolutions condemning Israel's use of force against Palestinian civilians. Most recently, Washington vetoed the Palestinian Authority's bid to join the UN as a full member. Although the Security Council's resolutions are legally binding, as opposed to the General Assemblies, they are either not implemented by all states or are deemed non-binding by the US, like a March 2023 resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Both of these bloody conflagrations, which the UN was unable to halt, have rendered it a bystander to mass atrocities. With its checkered history of moderating conflict, is it time for the UN system to be overhauled?